I grew up in a generation where people were often accused of letting the television raise their children and parent their children. And while I agree in a sense with that nothing substitutes parenting your kids yourself, when looking back on my generation and the parents, and especially the fathers, the majority of which had little to nothing to do with the emotional or even physical well-being of their kids, I always wanted to tell them, well, you sure as hell aren't doing it. I was literally raised by a host of wholesome TV dads, and in honor of a belated Father's Day, that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about my favorite fictional dads who absolutely raised me to be the person I am today. And we're going to start with number 11, Professor Plutonium from the Powerpuff Girls. Why exactly was this guy trying to make the perfect little girls in his basement? We're not sure. I think he was just lonely and wanted a family, and the cost of adoption was too damn high. But whatever the case, Professor Plutonium, unlike some other fictional men of science, did not use his superpowered children as child soldiers or completely ignored their well-being. And the focus of Professor Plutonium's character in The Powerpuff Girl, even though he is an extremely intelligent man of science, his entire character arc in the series is just him showing up for these three little superpowered kindergartners in his care. And their adoration for him is paid back tenfold. I remember the episode where Blossom steals the golf clubs for her dad just to make him happy, and while she knows that that's wrong, it goes to show that the girls will do literally anything for their scientist father. And especially with voice actor Tom Kane's passing, Professor Utonium's influence in my life only grows stronger. We love our science dad. Number 10 is Bandit Healer. Oh, Bandit Healer. Healing adult children with absentee fathers, one Bluey episode at the time. I love the way Bandit Healer's parenting for his two pups, Bluey and Bingo, and even by extension their friends, always comes from a place of gentleness, understanding, and love. I was raised with a very much don't cry or I'll give you something to cry about mentality when it came to fathers raising their kids in my generation. And to see Bandit always get down on his pups' level and just talk to them from a place they will understand always touches my heart and always makes me a little misty-eyed. I'm thinking about the episode Ben Night, where Bingo comes to her dad just broken-hearted because of another kid bullying her at school, and instead of telling her to toughen up or like, that's life, he really just gives her a hug and says, it's okay to cry about it. It's okay to get these feelings out. And for a male character, especially a dad, saying that to their kid is healing not only to this generation of children, but for their parents' and grandparents' generation. It's just another reason Bluey is such a phenomenal show. We love you, Bandit Healer. You are the best dog dad. At number 9, we have Greg Universe from Steven Universe. A lot like Bandit Healer, Greg kind of had a profession in music laid out before him. But instead of choosing a life of fame and fortune and stardom, he chose his kid. And he still continues to choose his kid every single time. And a lot like Bandit Healer, he's all about teaching his kid, his son no less, to be a very emotionally vulnerable person. I think about the episode where Steven is Sour Cream's roadie at his concert, and Sour Cream's deadbeat dad suddenly shows up. And Greg says to his son, don't you see the resemblance between Sour Cream and his father? And Steven, who was raised by a pure-hearted man, Greg Universe, looks at Sour Cream and his dad and says, nope, because he sees Sour Cream as such a loving and kind individual, and his dad is nothing more than a user. Also, you're not going to sit there and tell me the crystal gems could have raised Steven to adulthood. They didn't even understand what a baby fever was. Greg Universe was the one keeping this kid alive, and still was, and I will hear no hate against Greg Universe in this house. At number 8, we have a two-way tie between my goose fathers, Mr. Ping from Kung Fu Panda and Boris the Goose from the Balto series. Geese are pretty amazing creatures. Do you know that their connections and bonds are so strong that it will extend to creatures not even of their own species? And Mr. Ping and Boris are a great example of this. They just adopted these mammal cubs sight unseen, no questions asked. And their paternal instinct was so strong that they just raised them to be wonderful individuals. I love how Mr. Ping kind of comes across as this hard-ass businessman who actually seems kind of heartless, but when it comes to his panda cub, he is complete mush. I love the way he's constantly worrying about Po, who is the dragon warrior and a giant panda bear, running off to fight bad guys. And I love how surprised Po is when he finds out he's adopted. I know this scene is played for laughs, but it really goes to show just how much Po values his dad, and he only ever saw his father's love. He never really saw his physical form as an option. Also, I love the scene where Mr. Ping adopts Po and he just keeps chopping vegetables into his face and trying to put pants on him. And again, a lot with Greg Universe and Bandit Healer, Mr. Ping's entire character arc is just being a kind father to his son. But that doesn't mean he's without flaws. I love Kung Fu Panda 3, where he's jealous of Ping's dad, and in the end, he learns and tells Po's dad that none of this is about them. It's always about Po. And again, to see a father character just be completely de-centered and showing up for someone else is so refreshing and good. Boris the Goose is the same way. He was Balto's primary cheerleader. He was the one with him from the time he was abandoned as a cub. And Balto is kind of an emo, hard-ass guy, but every time the subject of Boris comes up, Balto is completely unapologetic about him. And this is a guy who carries a wound about his identity. But when it comes to his goose dad, he's like, no, my goose dad is amazing. What are you talking about? He says this to Alu in Wolf Quest and to Stella the goose, Boris's lady friend in Balto 3. And Boris is also always the one showing up and putting his neck on the line, sometimes literally, for his wolf dog son. I love the scene in Balto, and it's probably the most memorable scene where Balto's feeling very down and out. He doesn't know if he can complete this terrifying mission. And Boris says, a dog can't make this journey alone, but maybe a wolf can. And it goes to show how Boris never saw Balto's mixed blood as a handicap for him. He loved him for who he was. And as a gay kid, like, that is such a powerful message to hear a father say that. And I also love how Boris, a lot like Timon and Pumbaa, just kept adopting kids not of his own species, like Muck and Luck. And his influence definitely made Balto into the great dad he became. At number 7, we have Splinter from the Ninja Turtles. Speaking of awesome dads parenting kids who aren't their own species, Splinter was always such a real one. And in the beginning, he was just a kindly martial artist who loved art and painting, and he named his 4 turtle sons after his favorite painters. The origin story of the Ninja Turtles is perhaps the sweetest and most wholesome I've ever heard of in media. And Splinter's always there for his sons in every iteration of the Ninja Turtles. Probably the best and most heartfelt is in the most recent iteration of the Ninja Turtles in the movie Mutant Mayhem. And seeing Splinter as this very concerned father for his 4 turtle sons. Also, he was voiced by the late, great Mako in the 2007 cartoons. And speaking of Mako voicing amazing dad characters, at number 6 we have Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender. We'll always remember Uncle Iroh as the tea-loving badass who was also the head warrior of the White Lotus Society. And a lot like Splinter, he was completely unapologetic in his love for his son. Zuko had parents who were always expecting something of him, and how he could never quite live up to what their expectations for him. But Uncle Iroh, a lot like Boris the Goose, was never that way. He was absolutely the dad raising Zuko. Uncle Iroh has so many amazing moments. It's just this chill Tarian guy in the series who just loved his nephew, and by extension his nephew's friends. Aang's gang, or gang. But the scene I think most Avatar: The Last Airbender fans remember is in Season 3, when Zuko, after betraying his uncle and choosing the easy path, comes back to apologize. Zuko is in tears and expecting nothing, let alone forgiveness. And all Iroh does is pull him into a bear hug. All he wanted to see was his nephew safe. It's giving Mulan's dad, and Mulan, another great dad. We love you, Uncle Iroh, and rest in peace, Mako. You parented a generation of kids. Speaking of great actors voicing the most beloved dads, and me getting in my feelings about actors who went far before their time, Uncle Phil from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air comes in at number 5. Uncle Phil came across to begin with as this very stuffy character, a stick in the mud who did not like fun and especially did not love his freewheeling nephew, Will. But as time progressed, you learn that Uncle Phil has the heart of a teddy bear and a soul of pure gold. He's such a cool guy. He's rich, but he cares for the destitute. He's of the elite, but he's an amazing civil rights leader. And for a poor nephew whose dad was a complete deadbeat, he is the one stepping in to parent and comfort Will. Of course, I think every fan of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air points to this scene where Will Smith, after having a heart-rending conversation with his dad, who never cared for him and still doesn't except to use him, Will Smith is crashing out on his dad and just, for the first time in the series, showing this very vulnerable and hurt side. And what does Uncle Phil do? All he does, no words, is pulls his nephew into the best hug in TV history. And every kid with an absentee father felt this hug. And Uncle Phil wasn't just hugging Will Smith, he was hugging all of us in this scene who had complicated relationships with their parents. Rest in peace, Uncle Phil. You played one of the greatest dads on TV. At number 4, we have the Full House Bros, the 3 central male characters from the sitcom Full House. I know, Full House is kind of a cheesy show, but when I was a kid, it was my jam. And one of the main reasons is it showed these 3 men, very masculine men, in very nurturing roles that Western society would usually expect from women. And they did it amazingly. They knocked it out of the park. Them parenting the 3 Tanner girls was played for laughs sometimes, like in 3 Men and a Baby, but most of the time it was just them giving heartfelt advice, comfort, and love to these 3 kids growing up. I also love the way the 2 uncles and Danny Tanner had their own methods for parenting and for guiding and mentoring. Danny Tanner was kind of the helicopter parent, always hovering over his kids. He was a clean freak, but he kept a clean and happy home for his girls where they would feel safe. Jesse was the cool and adventurous uncle, but who was also very emotionally vulnerable to his 3 nieces. And Uncle Joey was the fun uncle, but he used his jokes and pranks in a way that taught the Tanner girls. Also, him and his little woodchuck friend they walked so that Bandit, Healer, and Unicorse could run. I love you, Uncle Joey. And though the private lives of these actors were far from sterling, to say the least, their portrayal of Uncle Jesse, Uncle Joey, and Danny Tanner will always go down as three of my favorite TV dads. At number 3, we have a two-way tie between Fred Rogers and Steve Irwin. Now, this is cheating a little bit because while they were playing TV personas, this was also the personas these men were living out in their real lives. And unlike so many actors who play these wholesome dad figures in media who have abysmal private lives, Fred Rogers and Steve Irwin always tried to walk the walk of the talk that they were giving. Fred Rogers was a minister who genuinely cared for people, and especially children. In fact, the intro song to Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood still calms me down to this day. Seeing the trolley in the intro and the perfectly creepy puppets in the land of make-believe. Hey, look, not everyone's perfect, okay? Some people love creepy puppets. It always just makes me feel better, like I'm a kid again and I'm watching Mr. Rogers tell me, I love you just the way you are. He was not only the first person, but the first man to ever tell me that I didn't have to achieve anything. I didn't have to reach anything to acquire love. He loved me for who I was, unconditionally, no matter what. And that was amazing. And yes, I still zip my cardigan up in that way, okay? Don't judge me. Steve Irwin was the same way, not only caring for people just the way they were, but all the creatures on Earth. He would take animals that many people saw as irredeemable and unlovable, simply based on their looks and behavior as just animals acting on instinct, and showed us how amazing and vital these creatures were for the earth to continue. Animals like crocodiles, snakes, spiders, and all the creepy crawlies that you're taught not to love. Steve Irwin showed us that they were amazing animals with their place in the earth, and that we should protect them from ourselves. Also, Steve Irwin's last request was not to hurt the animal that caused his death. And that is class, man. That's all I have to say. Also, you very much see Steve Irwin in the role of an actual biological father to his 2 kids. And them continuing his work with such heartfelt fervor really shows their devotion to their dad, paying back his kindness tenfold. Also, his son voices Alfie on Bluey, so that definitely shows how wholesome this family is. Rest in peace, Fred Rogers and Steve Irwin. You truly loved us just the way we were. At number 2, we have Jack and Arvid from the books Beau at Ballard Creek and Beau at Iditarod Creek. This is kind of a niche selection, especially for the number 2 spot, but it goes to show how much I love this book series and how much these 2 characters furthered LGBTQ plus couples in children's literature. Jack and Arvid are very gay for each other. They are absolutely husbands. So when they find an orphan girl and neither of them really have experience in raising a baby, what else do they do but take her in as their own daughter? And while the book Beau at Ballard Creek and Beau at Iditarod Creek is this swashbuckling adventure in Alaska, it just centers on these 2 gay fathers raising their rambunctious daughter and teaching her and mentoring her. Also, just seeing men with very traditionally masculine physiques and occupations and lifestyles being these very vulnerable and nurturing people, it really puts joy in my heart. There's so many good scenes from this book, but I love the scene where Jack is telling Beau about his fiancée who died back in Louisiana. And she asks him, was she pretty? And Jack smiles at Beau and says, when you're in love with someone, They're always pretty. They're always beautiful. And to hear a man who is very traditionally masculine in the Western sense say this to his daughter always brings a smile to my face. And I love these two gay dads. So before we get to our number one spot, our number one fictional dad, we are going to have some honorable mentions. Andy Taylor from The Andy Griffith Show. While Andy Griffith absolutely did not reflect the wholesome nature of his character in real life, Andy Taylor will always hold a special part in my heart as this guy in a 60s sitcom, no less, with a very traditionally masculine occupation, just raising his son on his own, with Aunt B, of course. She had a big role in that. But I love the episode Opie the Birdman, where instead of like physically punishing Opie for killing the mother of these baby birds, Andy tasked Opie with raising them. And I think that's probably the best lesson Opie could have. And you see Opie growing into this very gentle and sweet young man throughout the series because of his father's gentle influence. We have Maurice from Beauty and the Beast. He never judged his oddball daughter in their French village because he himself was very much of an oddball. I love the way Maurice and Belle are just both crazy and existing together, and they can always bond over how society sees them and demeans them by just pumping each other up and always being each other's best cheerleader. Also, Maurice shipped Belle and the Beast from the beginning, and I ship him and Mrs. Potts. Don't hate. I also love Calvin Klein's portrayal of Maurice in the reboot, which is actually really great. We have Woody from Toy Story, and yeah, Woody might have been a plastic cowboy, but he was absolutely Andy's dad. He reacts in the way a father would. He feels jealous in the way a father would over Andy, and he's always there for Andy. He never gives up on him. Through all his childhood, through his college years, and even beyond, Woody will always be Andy's dad, and Andy will always be his son. At the end of Toy Story 3, where Woody says, "So long, partner," all of us kids who not only grew up with Andy, but grew up with Woody's gentle guidance, shed a tear. And finally, we are at the number one spot of our favorite fictional dads. Let's have a drum roll, please. And the number one spot for our favorite fictional dad is a two-way tie between Walter Skinner from The X-Files and Captain Don Cragen from Law & Order SVU. Walter Skinner is FBI-flavored hot dad. Captain Cragen is NYPD-flavored hot dad. I love these two. They both hold the top spot in my heart for fictional dads. Walter Skinner raised me. And again, with a lot of characters on this list, he had a typically masculine occupation and role. And he worked and lived in a society with a whole lot of toxic masculinity. But Mr. Skinner never chose that. He always chose to be the vulnerable and nurturing dad that his FBI children needed at that time. The first thing Mulder sees when he awakens from alien unconsciousness and fight the future? That's right, it's his FBI dad, Walter Skinner. Dana Scully needs someone to keep her alien baby a secret? Her dad, Walter Skinner. When Reyes and Doggett get holed up by the Mexican police who are working for a drug-dealing vampire? Guess who comes riding in like the General Lee from the Dukes of Hazzard? That's right, it's their supportive FBI father. There are too many great moments where Walter Skinner shows up for his FBI kids. But I'm thinking of the episode Zero Sum, which is all about Mr. Skinner not only putting everything he has, but everything he believes in on the line to save his daughter, Dana Scully. This is a guy who will absolutely do anything for his kids. And one of my greatest honors in life was meeting actor Mitch Pileggi, who is so much like his character, Mr. Skinner. Ask me about that story sometime. In the same breath is Captain Don Cragen. He is such a hard ass, but you can always go into his office, eat his probably expired Halloween candy, and just tell him about all of your problems. That is so nice in this show, how his cop children will just come to him and unload on him because they have very sad and stressful jobs. I love the episode in season 1 where Olivia comes to Captain Cragen with her problems because she's just investigating this heartbreaking case, of course. And Captain Cragen just casually tells her about the horrifying death of his wife, like he's walking the dog. We love you, Captain Cragen. And we love you, Mr. Skinner. You will forever be our favorite fictional dads. So, to all the great dads out there who show up for their kids every day, who are nurturing and vulnerable and kind to their children, we wish you a happy belated Father's Day. And to all the fictional dads who raised us, well, sometimes TV raising your kids isn't such a bad thing. Because with characters like this, they're always providing great mentoring. Thank you to all the great dads out there, and thank you to all the dads who raised us. Fictional or real. We'll see y'all next time.